I think you can agree with me when I say that the educational system in America is probably one of those institutions that all of us deal with at one time or another in our lives. We may not all attend public schools. We may not even, some of us may be homeschooled, and yet we're still responding to the expectations of our society as far as education is concerned. So even in a homeschooling basis, I believe that one is a part of the education system in America. There are certain things that Americans are taught, American children are taught as being Americans, that not only provide you with education and knowledge that enables you to function in the economic system in the world, it also provides you with philosophies that bind you to the American spirit, so to speak, that includes some values such as patriotism and loyalty and walking on the right side of the hallway. Although I don't know if you've been in schools lately, that doesn't happen so much anymore. But obedience and all of those types of things are really kind of taught to students in the American school system, and really are some of the things that kind of help make you an American, help make us an American as we go through this system. And so I just say that to say that this is a very key part of our lives. And so a discussion about the education system in America is something that I think is, it's just something that's worth really taking some time to talk about, and to see also what the role of social workers are in this very, very important system. In 2004, these statistics show that only 4.5% of the children from the least affluent 25% of American families obtained a bachelor's degree, whereas 51% of the children from America's 25% most affluent families obtained this degree. We're talking about the separation here between the wealthy and the poor, and this is one of the things that I think from a sociological standpoint and from a social work intervention standpoint that is very important to understand when we think about inequalities. And that is that we're not only talking about inequalities based on race, probably more we're talking about inequalities based upon socioeconomic level. And poor children do not have the same opportunity that wealthier children have in our culture. And here's a good statistic to demonstrate that. About half of the children from the top quarter of our nation go on to higher education, whereas not even 1 in 20 from the least affluent quarter of our families go on to higher education. And I've heard a couple of studies and read some things recently that make it quite clear that if you have a college degree, you are earning significantly more than your counterparts who have only a high school degree later in life. Don't let anyone convince you that getting the college degree isn't useful, because statistics demonstrate that it is. And you can go online and Google that discussion if you need to. I wish I had some of the cold figures in front of me. Unfortunately, one of them was in one of my great course lectures that I was listening to as driving down the highway, and I didn't have a pencil. I couldn't record it, but he's very emphatic in his lectures. And I've also seen another piece of literature recently that said the same thing, basically. Not only that, but if you have a master's degree, you earn so much more than if you have a bachelor's, and if you have a PhD, so much more than a master's. Each successive step guarantees you a higher income on average than your counterparts with less education. So this matters. This really matters, this information here. Public education, we believe, is an equal educational experience, but we know that the schools in affluent American communities differ very dramatically from schools in our poorest communities. Jonathan Kozol wrote a book, and there is a shortened article of it that's available online and has actually been in some of the textbooks that I've taught out of in my sociology class, called Savage Inequalities, that demonstrates very clearly. It is, I think he compares a school in Long Island with a school in East St. Louis, Missouri, and the difference is just appalling and amazing at the same time. Dropout rates are higher in less affluent schools, not surprisingly. Rates of learning are lower. Teachers in those schools oftentimes are teaching to overcrowded classrooms and have to wind up dealing with a lot of behavioral problems, less time teaching academic subjects. Race and income do have a bearing on the educational experience, and here's some demonstrations of this. That about two-thirds of Hispanic males completed high school in 1998, but more than 90% of Caucasian students did. 28% of Caucasian students who completed high school then went on to complete college. Only 10% of Hispanic students did so, 16% of African American students. The most important factors associated with educational achievement of children were not race, ethnicity, or immigrant status, according to one study in 2004, but rather the level of parental education, the economic level of the neighborhood, the parents' occupational status, and the income of the family. So you're talking socioeconomics here, not so much about race and ethnicity, according to at least one person, and I tend to believe this. I think these authors found that parents who use less discipline but greater parental warmth have children with fewer behavioral problems, and as we said in an earlier slide, that's going to suggest that they're going to do better educationally. This ties back into the discussion some weeks back, I think, about the kinds of parenting that's most effective. And remember, I had talked about the kind and firm parent, and that's what we're talking about here. Less discipline does not mean less structure. It means instead of punishment, parents are focused more upon the warmth in their interactions with their children. But neighborhood poverty was such a strong predictor of behavior problems among young children, and that you have to really kind of take a look at just in general what kind of neighborhood they're growing up in, and those that grow up in poor neighborhoods are going to exhibit more aggressive and anxious behaviors, regardless of the kinds of parents that they have. There's a debate in society about whether private schools or public schools are more preferable. Private schools, according to some statistics, have an advantage over public schools when you look at raw scores. But if you control for the factors like race and gender and parents' education and income, those differences disappear. And so really what you're looking at with private schools is that the students that go to private schools tend to come from other circumstances that favor them doing well academically. It isn't so much the school itself as it is their background and experiences that they take to that school, at least according to the Shimo's study of 2006. You'll hear a lot in the news about, in this state in particular, about voucher programs and whether or not government should institute a voucher program. That was also discussed at a national level during the first George Bush Sr.'s administration. The idea being that instead of all children having to go to public schools, parents could be given a voucher to purchase schooling for them in a private or religious school of their choice. Basically, it's sort of a charter school, and give parents the option of where to put their kids. And there are many who believe this would improve the quality of education that's offered to kids. Others think that it would water down the resources for public education so greatly, and that already our public schools are having problems, and when they need more resources, to take resources away from them only dooms them to further failure. School violence is also a source of concern, and of course it's in the news all of the time. I think most of what I've been hearing lately about this tells me that school violence isn't really increasing these days, even though it seems to be, perhaps because it makes the news more often. But we have this kind of idea that it's increasing. But you can see here that there's kids bringing weapons to school, kids being killed or wounded in schools with those weapons, teachers threatened, teachers assaulted. And half of those kids who bring weapons to school say that the weapons are for protection against other kids with weapons. It's a pretty scary proposition when you think of it, And of course, for learning, you've got to have a calm environment. I mean, if students are in an environment where they have to fear for their safety and they're always looking over their shoulder and their fight or flight part of the brain is really activated and on guard, the thinking center of the brains, their cortex, isn't really going to be engaged that much. They're not going to learn as much, simply put. And this is one of the reasons why kids from schools in some of those neighborhoods that are more crime-ridden and everything don't do as well. But this is also true to some extent with really many schools that also in the um, middle class and upper middle income neighborhoods as well. You can see here that 18% of students, high school students in one youth risk survey said they carried a weapon of some sort during the 30 days preceding the survey. During the 30 days preceding the survey, not in the last year or the last 5 years, but in the last month. What's that? 1 in 6 have carried a weapon in school. Some of them guns. About 8% were threatened or injured with a weapon on school property during the year before that survey. And some of these statistics repeat themselves. It seems 5.4% of students have missed one or more days of school because they had felt too unsafe to go to school. And there's a number of reasons here, and the statistics in the book don't make a whole lot of sense, but basically I think it says that this study, I think, what are the reasons why school violence, why do you believe that there's an increase in school violence if indeed that's the case? And 85% or more individuals, according to the book, identified one or more of these areas as a reason for increased school violence. And you see that lack of rules and family structure, parental supervision, parental violence themselves, parental drug use top the list. And there is certainly a lot of concerns about what goes on in the home and how those things carry over into the school setting. Fitzpatrick's study says that a major predictor of school victimization is just how safe students assess their own school environments to be. So that basically he says that kids that have a more negative view of the safety of their school are more likely to be victimized. I'm sure he's controlling for what comes first and what's the result, but it seems like this could work the other way as well, that kids that are in violent schools feel or rather kids that are victimized more feel their schools are unsafe, but in any event, his theory is that children who perceive dangerous environments find themselves in the midst of those environments for whatever reason. It could very well be that the children are perceiving things accurately. How do family problems fit into school acting out? The family is thought to be the most violent institution in our society, according to some philosophical views these days. And unfortunately, in our families, the aggression is often used as the primary means to resolve conflict. Almost 20% of homicides, almost 1 in 5 homicides in the United States occur in the family situation. There are those who believe that parents who use harsh physical means to discipline kids raise kids who wind up battering others and who are aggressive towards others. That's how they express their frustration in resolving problems. That's certainly not anything that would surprise anybody that works in the field. As the old saying goes, children learn what they live. Certainly kids that have behavior problems before 9 display more aggressive tendencies as adults. Child abuse and neglect certainly has something to do with distrust in children, as we talked about in an earlier chapter, that leads to aggressive interactions with peers and other adults. And abuse and neglect by parents also makes kids feel vulnerable, which contributes to that cycle of aggression as well. And the school certainly is an area where kids may feel vulnerable, as this is really the first area they're away from their parents usually. Some kids are now in daycare centers, but again, this is a very different kind of an environment than a daycare center. And so sometimes those kids that feel very threatened and vulnerable may engage in aggressive behaviors just to kind of ward off any of those threats. Teachers point to the home environment to explain school violence is not surprising to you or me. The lack of rules and family structure and supervision, parental violence, parental drug use, these kinds of things that really were on the top of the other list that we just looked at a little bit ago. And this author says that as the basic structure of the family disintegrates, violence among family members increases, and this violence spills into the classroom. I would caution you with that statement to keep in mind that thus means that we're accepting that the basic structure of the family is disintegrating in our society. I don't think on the whole it is. Perhaps on an individual kind of anecdotal level, as a family disintegrates, these things occur. But I don't think on a societal level our family structure is disintegrating. I think it's changing. It's very different. Here's what the Department of Labor says school social workers do. Helping kids improve their academic function, maximize family well-being, advise teachers on how to cope with problem students, address kinds of problems like misbehaviors and pregnancies and things like that. Social workers in the school districts either work for school districts or for mental health or family services agencies that contract with the school districts. This is a sort of a new development, and new by meaning probably in the last 20 years or so, where mental health centers and social service agencies actually place therapeutic interventionists into schools to do groups and work with at-risk kids. School districts have their own issues with funding, and so a lot of times guidance counselors, who really are not really social workers, generally speaking, their schedule, they're focused mostly on academic schedules and on getting kids through the program and getting prepped for college and vocations and things. But school social workers that are in there working with the nitty-gritty of things, there are fewer and fewer of them in my own experiences, and more what we see are the public health centers or public mental health centers and agencies placing professionals into schools, and the schools working with those individuals to identify those kids who need interventions and help and provide those things. So teachers refer those kids and ask the workers to assess family functioning and to assess the child's emotional life to see if there are things that can be done to help that child with those issues so they can focus better in school and do better in the school environment. Sometimes workers are involved in special programs in schools, especially groups for kids that are acting out in class or have attention problems, learning difficulties. There are psychoeducational kinds of groups that those workers will do also. And they often join a team of interventionists in a school developing IEPs and other kinds of intervention plans for students that are appearing to have some troubles. On a macro level, school social workers will provide a number of services that involve community organization and development and organizational change. So they really are kind of out there in the forefront of advocacy efforts, to try to provide enhanced well-being for the students in the schools, and that may involve advocating for family functions, family issues in the community, as well as for things in the school itself. And the textbook quotes one source just to close out this discussion. The five main problems that need to be rectified for public education to function more effectively. One is the question of who's going to control the education, and this particular study believes that the local control of education results in schooling the schools that underachieve and are poorly funded, and suggests that control of education by the federal government might help us develop more uniform standards and have in general just a better school environment for kids. There are a lot of people who would take issue with that discussion, but I think that's something that's worth thinking about. Improve standards, higher standards for students, and more accountability for schools. And if students certainly should be expected, I would think at least, to be able to demonstrate a certain amount of academic capacity and competency before they get a diploma. Students are being graduated in schools without that. They can't read or write, and I can tell you that for a fact from some of my teaching over the years. And so standards is something that's probably pretty important, and there are movements occasionally, to eliminate those, like graduation qualifying exams and things like that, so that nobody has to demonstrate their competencies. Likewise, if the school isn't producing the results, that administration be held accountable. A lot of times the pressure is put on teachers to produce, and teachers are the ones in the classroom, but it isn't always up to the teachers. The teachers are working with what they're given sometimes, and administration and school district and school board personnel should also be held accountable for the functioning of the schools. Children should be taught to think critically, and this has, of course, been a subject of some discussion in our class and will be throughout the semester, as well as other classes that I teach in. To be able to think independently, come up with their own solutions to problems. It does make education much more interesting, rather than just being spoon-fed things and being told this is what you are to believe and this is what you're to think. Education should be teaching you how to think, and how to think on your own, and how to gather the facts and the information so that you can make informed decisions about things and not just wind up repeating what it is that other people tell you, in this case students repeating what their teachers tell them. Again, unless I'm your teacher. Equitable funding, and this is the point of the Kozol Savage Inequalities article that I mentioned to you earlier in this particular lecture. If you're looking for more reading in this topic, I really encourage you to dig that article up, Savage Inequalities. It will be on the web, and there's a shortened version of it that really won't take a whole long time to read. It was written some time ago, but it's still very valid today. And you can see here that the kids that attend school in poorer neighborhoods will have less money spent on them and on their teachers than those from more affluent neighborhoods, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Kozol's article just really kind of makes it much more graphic and real to you, and there are other examples of those kinds of things as well. Competition is recommended here. Again, this is a topic with some level of debate in today's society, and in this state in particular right now. Do we give parents vouchers so they can go send their kids to public or private schools, or should we focus more upon better funding and adequate funding for the public schools, and so that public school system has a chance of succeeding? The way that the school's funded in Alaska, this per student, so that with some exceptions for bush communities and things, there's a certain level that the state funds each student. So that depending upon the number of kids in the school census, then they get so much money from the state. Local governments can add to that as well, so that they can increase the per student funding. The funding that the state is providing right now in Alaska per student is probably very inadequate. And I would just close this discussion by asking you to consider whether or not, if you are an Alaskan, whether or not it makes sense that we're not adequately funding our educational system when we have billions and billions of dollars in a permanent fund that is intended to ensure that the state never goes broke. Now, I'm not suggesting that we take all of that money, but couldn't a portion of that money be taken and establish an endowment so that the education of our future generations is better assured? I really think that the leaders of our state may be failing the children and families of this state through inadequate funding, not only of high schools, but also of universities as well. So something for you to think about. Remember, one of the things that social workers do is to advocate on a macro level, and that can include contacting your legislators and representatives and telling them you're watching how they vote, and that's going to impact your vote. That's one way you create change in this field. Okay, that's all for this discussion, and let me know if there's anything you want to talk about related to this. Thank you.